Welcome to the Pestle, reviewing and breaking down movies to look for insights into the movie-making process. Hosted by The Apocalypse. Finally, we're all outside playing again. Let's blow out the candles and start the show.
Welcome, everybody, to the Pestle. Today's show is brought to you by Nuka-Cola. Annihilate your thirst with an atomic blast of Nuka-Cola. Welcome. That was me doing voiceover voice. Welcome, everybody, to the Pestle. I am Wes.
And I am Todd.
And what would you say we do here, Todd? That's also my my Office Space voice.
What you say you do here? I would say we like to watch movies and then talk about what we see in them from the perspective of a granular perspective. I would say. Not so much as the details here and the details there, but more of like hey, did you catch this? Did you catch that? And sometimes you like to get into the nitty gritty and the details of, hey, this shot, they probably used this type of lens and that sort of stuff is really fun if you know if our viewers or listeners know what you're talking about. And even if they don't, it's interesting to understand the science, I would say, behind filmmaking, because the more that I do these episodes with you, the more that I learn how much of a science it really is. And it's so funny because, I love listening to like Martin Scorsese talk and Spielberg talk about filmmaking and Quentin Tarantino talk about filmmaking. And I know they're coming from the perspective of someone who has millions of dollars to make a film, but so you have to take their advice, quote unquote, with a grain of salt. However, there are some details about it that just make sense, and that if you're in it and doing it, you can step back and see, oh, there is a broad stroke you can make with filmmaking and storytelling in general, that can surpass the budget or lack thereof, that can surpass the help and the crew that you don't have, and that's where I like to talk about like those, overarching things, and you do too. But once you get past those things and you're talking about like, okay, well, now that we're able to tell a story with no budget, if we had budget, what could we do with these details? How detailed can we get with the little budget we have to make it that much better? Because I don't care what you say, budget changes what a film looks and feels like. It just does. If you have $5,000, it's going to look and feel different than if you have $5 million. And there's a reason for that. Anyway, long story short, that's what we do. We like to get into the overarching themes of a film and then get down deep into the granular stuff when necessary to explain some stuff. And sometimes that is necessary.
Love it, man. Well said, bro. Nice. And with that in mind, what are we going to be diving into today?
Today, we are covering the Book of Eli. So if you haven't seen it, please pause this episode, go watch it. I believe it's streaming on Max or HBO Max, whatever they're called, because we're going to be spoiling a bunch of stuff. And this is one that you definitely don't want us to spoil for you.
For sure. We'll dive into a bunch of stuff. We'll definitely touch on visual style. It's kind of hard to not talk about it on some level. You'll probably cover it, in fact. But we'll look at some of that. We'll also talk about some of the story and writing, maybe touch on a little bit of the theme, the way maybe the theme can inform the way you outline and approach your story from the beginning, and other such stuff and things and stuff. I also went to a screening, and I'll talk about things I learned in the screening. And so everything.
Oh, I can't wait for that. A quick synopsis of the film. I love your synopses. They're always really interesting, especially when there's a lot to cover and you have to say it in a sentence. 90%
of the time I rip it straight off IMDb, but then sometimes, including this week, I will edit it. I'm like, I think that's not right. This is a better way.
Yep. Or not just not right, but I think it gives away too much.
Yes.
In a way. Right. Yes. That's what I see in you. Quick synopsis. A post-apocalyptic tale in which a lone man fights his way across America in order to protect a sacred book. It's directed by the Hughes Brothers. Screenplay by Whitta. Cinematography by Don Burgess. I keep seeing him on so many films that we cover. Featuring Denzel Washington as Eli, Gary Oldman as Carnegie, Mila Kunis as Solara, and Jennifer Beals as Claudia.
Is that thing loaded? I don't think it's loaded.
One way to find out.
Look, I need that book. I mean, I want the book. And you, but if you make me choose, I'll kill you. I'll take the book.
Why? Why do you want it?
I grew up with it. I know its power. If you read it, then so do you. That's why they burned them all after the war. It's just staying alive is an act of faith. Building this town is an even bigger act of faith, but they don't understand that. None of them. And I don't have the right words to help them, but the book does. I admit, I've had to do things, many things I hate to build this, I confess that. But if we have that book, I wouldn't have to. Imagine how different, how righteous this little world could be if we had the right words for our faith. Well, if people would truly understand why they're here and what they're doing, and they wouldn't need any of the uglier motivations. It's not right to keep that book hidden away. It's meant to be shared with others. It's meant to be spread. Is that what you want?
With all my heart and soul. I always believed that I'd find a place where this book belonged, where it was needed. I haven't found it yet.
I love this guy.
So, Book of Eli, man. What do you think?
So good. So good. I mean, Denzel is an easy sell for me always.
Yeah.
The man is just so nonchalant that it's impossible to not believe him. There's no ounce of I'm trying to act in anything that he's ever done. I've never, what is interesting. There are some actors that you always see, but you never do, you never like experience. And I think he's definitely one of those that falls into that category of I love watching Denzel Washington in his roles, but I don't see Denzel. You always see him, but like, you don't really like see him. He's just he is the character. I think this is one of those great examples of that, where he has this perfect air about him of silent but deadly, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. He's a warrior. Is the term, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war or something. And he's definitely a warrior with the vibe of a gardener, of being in a garden. He has this way of giving you this sense of ease in a scene like that, where you're thinking, and this is a perfect example, by the way, of putting your character in a position where you have no idea how they could get out. Right? You're seeing he's surrounded completely. Like, how could he possibly get out of this? And yet, we've already done the spoiler alert, yet he gets out. And part of it is because of his absolute drive and blind faith, that he is on a mission, that he was told he would be protected, and knows when to act and when not to act, just based off of his feeling. He's totally reliant upon the fact that he's going to be protected, except when he knows he needs to take action to protect himself in the book. And he has the wisdom to know the difference between the two, right? Or when to act. And it's just a wonderful experience to watch this man who has all the faith in the world. Like, no matter what, knows exactly where to go, and he doesn't know how he's going to get there. He has no idea. In fact, it's such a beautiful moment where he's walking down the path at this one point, and there's a fork in the road, and he doesn't know, do I go left or do I go straight? And he stops for a second and he looks both ways, and then he just takes a step and he walks forward. It's just an act that alone is an act of faith that he has to take, a decision he has to make. And just seeing that, it has been such an easy thing to cut out of the film, but it was so important to have a little 10-second clip of that showing that everything that this guy does is out of faith. If he's going to cut off your hand, it's out of faith. It's out of like, I need to protect this book, and I know that these guys will kill me. I have to kill them. And then at the end of that whole scene where he's at the very beginning where he kills all those guys under the bridge, that one guy who he cut his hand off, he knows he has to kill him because otherwise that guy's going to come back after him. His only goal is to protect that book. And that evolves over the course of the film, where he now has Mila Kunis' character that he has to protect, who is Solara, that he has to protect and takes with him because he sees good in her. But it's just a wonderful story of a particular guy who knows his vision and his journey, and then a wonderful way of telling it where every single moment heightens the next moment, or it solidifies a specific goal of a character. It's just really, really beautiful. Love it.
Dude, well said, man. I think I always struggle to put my finger on exactly why I love this movie. And I just don't know what it is, because it's not that, I'm this big faith kind of person and that this is speaking to me on this, symbolic level of what it means to have faith and to carry it with you, blah, blah, blah. So it's not that, even though I kind of love his mission. And I think the thing that really helps pull me in is the final moments whenever you see the book go on the shelf, right? It goes on a shelf between the Torah and the Quran. And that's kind of a flare that this isn't about Christianity. It's about faith. It's about something else. And that's a beautiful picture that they're creating this world that isn't going to be determined by any one faith. It's opening up faith to everyone. And all these roads, all these avenues are available to everyone. And I so appreciate that little finesse, that little touch that they put on there to just let you know that it's not really about this faith. It's about faith in general, or maybe even just the bigger message. I think thematically, it's I'll come back to that in a minute, but I just don't know. But I know part of it is certainly it's just Denzel being on screen. He's so compelling, and I love the way you put it. He has that essence, this vibe of a warrior in a garden. Like, yes, he's poised. He's always in control, even whenever you feel everything is starting to spin out of control around him. You never lose faith in Denzel on screen. There's very few films where you ever feel like he's not in a position of power. There's just something about that guy. He carries it with him. And then watching in a film like this, it's all heightened to a whole other degree whenever, that bridge scene at the beginning is one of the greatest fight scenes of all time. Like, it's up there. It's got to be top 10, if not top 5. And I don't even know what those others would necessarily be right off the top of my head, but I know that's in it. I do know that. It's just so good and so fast. I think that's the other thing that I really love about this film is you never get a sense that the fight sequences are there to be fight sequences. They're there to serve a purpose in the story and to convey something about the characters. And so nothing ever feels spectacle for spectacle's sake. It's always there to drive the story forward in one capacity or another. And I think that pulls me into the drama of this world, instead of just feeling like, oh, I'm settling in for an action film. It's like, no, I'm settling in for a drama that has some action in it. And those are just two completely different experiences, right? You go to a John Wick film to see the action. You come to this film to see some drama and then see some hands get chopped off. That's cool.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. I think part of it too is the genre. Like, I love apocalypse films, and not a lot of, it's hard to pull off. I don't know how many apocalypse films really sell their own vision. A lot of them feel like they're part of, this genre's oeuvre more than they are its own film. I walk into this film and I'm like, I'm watching the Book of Eli. I don't think I'm watching a post-apocalyptic film. That just happens to be the setting that carries a story forward, and it's part and parcel. You can't have one without the other, but I feel like the story necessitates the setting more than inversely. I don't know. It's all those things. It's none of those things. Like, can you put your finger on why this movie sings the way it does?
Well, I love that you mentioned where they put the book at the end, and that I didn't actually think about, like, I just looked at it as something like they're trying to retain knowledge, but you're totally right that they put it between two other books of faith. And so I think maybe it speaks to humanity and individual people of, like, don't try to have everything figured out. Just look inside yourself and figure out what it is that's driving you, what it is that is pushing you forward. Because I think that we all have this thing that, like, kind of like, why do we get up in the morning? Well, maybe some days I can't tell you, but many days I can. And so, like, trust that and not worry about, like, where you want to be in a year or 10 years or whatever. Just keep going forward. Whatever it is that you need to have faith in, find that and unapologetically do it. Because that's definitely what he does. Also, I think it's the violence that kind of solidifies this as not just a straight faith-based movie, right? Because so many faith-based movies are anti-violence, or they have a character that's anti-violent. And I mean, even Batman, he's violent, but, like, he won't kill people, but you have this guy who's supposedly, like, super religious and like more than anybody that you'd know. And he does not hesitate to kill you in a second if he thinks that you are going against him, or trying to get the book. And I think it's kind of opposite from a lot of stories that are kind of like this, where he's just very aggressive if you're aggressive to him unapologetically. And that probably kind of seeps into your bones of thinking of, like, making it okay to fight for this thing that you believe in. I don't fully know. And it's Denzel and Mila Kunis. So right. I got you. You got me. I mean,
yeah, it's all good there, right? I will say, like, I finished, kind of put a pin or a button on my first and last previous feature script that I finished. I did a big rewrite after I said I'm not gonna do it myself just yet. Instead, I'll do one more draft where I throw a budget out the window. And this goes back to your point when we started. There's so much more you can do when the budget isn't $5,000, when it is $5 million. And I finally put that hat on, like, okay, in this script, without completely changing the entire script, what would I do that I couldn't do on my own if I threw it to, Legendary or some other big studio, Lionsgate? What would I do with that $5 million budget if I could, have it? Okay, here's a few ideas that are big, and it just changed everything. Anyway, I put the button on that and started working on a new idea, and I just have a whole sheet full of ideas of, like, this could be a script, this could be a script. I probably have an easy dozen that if I just hold up for a year, I could write a script a month, easily. And finally started narrowing in on the goal of any script. And I don't care if your budget is 5,000 or 5 million or 500 million, probably, well, it defeats the purpose of the $500 million budget. But the goal of every story screenplay is, what can I make that has a really high concept but doesn't cost a lot? Like everybody wants that, like studios and me, like everyone. And I kind of honed in on like, oh, I think I have that idea. And started working out some of the mechanics of it with our buddy Scott Garrett Graham. And then I kind of came to a point, I was like, okay, before we go any further, we need to figure out what's the theme. Like, and there's so many ways you can approach theme. Theme to me is almost like a useless term because it can embody so many different concepts or approaches. It's kind of the driving heartbeat of your story, whether it's spoken aloud or not. Sometimes I look at it as this subtextual conversation that you're having throughout your film. Sometimes I look at it as a dramatic question. Sometimes I look at it as a dramatic argument that you're trying to make on behalf of the film. And any one of those approaches can help inform the way you write or outline your story. And that's part of the utility of it is, okay, I'm going to make a dramatic argument about faith. Let's see what do I need to write now? And this is the informative part of, okay, if I'm going to make this dramatic argument, I need to write for it, against it, and try to think around what helps me prove out and tease out this argument that I'm making. And so where I'm going with this is as I'm trying to think about my own script and figure out what is going to be my theme, is it going to be a dramatic question? I really want a dramatic argument. And in order to help me with that, I start kicking around ideas. It helps me a lot to just start reading other people's thoughts and ideas about theme. Because maybe they'll say something that triggers the thought, right? It's a way of kind of stretching for me. And so I started reading, I started Googling and I started going through forums, and I found a forum that I've never seen before. And they start talking about, it becomes this like 40-page fight between screenwriters about theme and what does it mean? Where does it come from? How do you approach it? What's the point of theme in the first place? And blah, blah, blah. And some of them start bringing up examples of theme. And I forget one of I think Nemo is a big recurring one because one of the writers, Craig Mazin, uses Finding Nemo as like his perfect point about thematic writing. And his big phrase is central dramatic argument, and which seems a bit laborious, but whatever, floats your boat. And so he kind of goes through that. And then another writer pops in completely randomly, I promise, like 2 days ago, because this message board is like 12 years old, 13 years old. And someone brings up Book of Eli. Like, I was like, wow. They bring up like 3 different movies. And the third one, I think, is Unforgiven. And one of them is Book of Eli. And I was like, well, okay, I can't stop reading. I'm still in research mode. But it does violate my principle of, reading other people's thoughts about a film that we're covering. And along the way, someone was like, actually, Gary Whitta said what his theme was, and it's XYZ. And someone else was like, well, that actually proves my point, because just because he phrased it this way doesn't mean it can't be rephrased in another context. That is still the exact same concept, just, different utility and approach. And the theme, and I've already forgotten it, I didn't write it down, but it was something to the effect of the theme of Book of Eli from his perspective. And it doesn't have to be everyone's. That's the beauty of art, as we've said in a time or two. But his perspective of this film was, it was looking at how faith can be used for evil and for good. That's the bare bones of it. He probably says it much more poetically, but that's the idea. And you can see that played out. Now, if you start with that concept, and if you wanted to turn it into a dramatic question, it would be, how can faith be used for good or evil? And then you could answer it that way. Another dramatic argument would be, again, it's just rephrasing it, and how you phrase it can help or hurt you as a writer. And I would probably phrase it more as a dramatic argument being along the lines of faith can be used for the greater good or for greater evil. Something along those lines, that it's not what the faith is, it's how it's used by the wielder. It can be used for good or evil. And this film is a really good kind of use case for that, right? Because we see 2 different people going through two different experiences in life, in this really hard life of the post-apocalypse. You have Gary Oldman's character, right? Who he's wanting faith for his own power. Now he's couching it in these kind of idealistic, let me appeal to the better nature of angels kind of thing, right? Eli, I swear, like I'm so bad. I'm so sorry for all the bad things I've done, but I had to do it. You see what I'm trying to do here, right? And if I only had the right words, I wouldn't have to do all those bad things. You can see the way someone's trying to pervert faith. And I remember this old CNN segment from ages ago, and someone was being interviewed, and it was I can't remember if he was Muslim. I want to say he was, and they were interviewing him. This is like around 2010, still around the same era. And they're like, can't you see what Islam is being used to do? And it's just evil. This is what it calls for. This is not like an accident. This is what it is. And he was like, no, you can find any religion being perverted. It's not about the religion. It's about what you bring to it. If you want to use it for evil, you can. I can show you Christians that have used Christianity for evil. I can show you Buddhists who use Buddhism for evil. It's never about the religion. It's about the person holding it and what they want to accomplish with it. And it was just such a beautiful sentiment. It's just rung in my ears ever since, that I never judged the religion. And, I judged the person using it. And this is just that all over again, right? It's one character, Carnegie, trying to use religion for his own ends. And then and the beautiful arc of Eli, of course, is he's so focused on achieving, his mission, that at the end of the movie, he's like, I forgot to live by what I learned through this faith. And I love it because he doesn't say this is what it is. He just says, this is what it means to me. And that's such a great way. It's the complete antithesis of whatever Carnegie was going to want to do with it, right? Because Eli is saying it's not about what I think it should be used for, as opposed to Carnegie was going to be, I want to use it for X, and it shall be X. And Eli saying it's about doing more for others than you do for yourself. At least that's what I got out of it. In other words, it's open to interpretation. What a beautiful, contrast between our hero and villain, and just the use of faith, and just the way to keep that in tune with everything else that's kind of happening along the way. Because to your point, yes, Eli is greatly capable of violence, and he will completely chop you apart if he suspects you're not, gonna be a good guy. But he never starts there. He always tries to give people the opportunity to back away. Like, hey, it doesn't have to be this way. And he gave even the bridge sequence, which is incredible. The first thing he says is, I understand you, you understand me. Yeah? Well, let me tell you something. You touch me again, you're not going to get that hand back. And this guy, of course, tests his luck, and bam. But that whole sequence is fantastic. I even love, it just establishes the shot really well with this wide aerial shot. And then we cut in to this perfect, beautiful contrast of Eli walking in from under the bridge, silhouetted against the background. And we have this kind of wide two shot that we enter into with him in the background walking in and the woman in the foreground. And we just kind of dolly to the side of her as we're kind of establishing our 180 rule. And it's just, we reverse angle for the whole fight sequence under the bridge. And it's so good. Okay, obviously the silhouettes are beautiful, but it's choreographed to absolute perfection, because you have to understand the way they visualize that fight was to be in silhouette. And in order to do that, it needs to remain perfectly clear what action is happening, who is whom, and allow the viewer to fully see everything without having to actually make out any details whatsoever. Like, that's a lot of pre-visualizing and working through with the stunt team of, okay, let's make sure that whenever this works in perfect black and white, if we were to just have a black and white image, can we understand this sequence? Do we understand who Denzel is? Do we understand who the bad guys are? Is there ever any? And so you have to figure out the silhouettes of the characters themselves. You have to make sure the fight is happening in profile, right? In parallel, so that, we don't get caught up in confused in the depth, right? And so the characters have to be lined up, but it also has to feel motivated for everyone to feel that way. And so you're working through a lot of the, not just how the fight should happen, but why it's happening, so that everything feels honest. It never feels forced. And that's just, hats off to that stunt team. And obviously Denzel for being a badass, because that's a one shot. And this, so I got to see a screening of this, and I double checked the date. It was January 11th, 2010. And so that was over 13 years ago. And so if I don't remember a lot, forgive me, but I do remember some stuff, despite, again, being 13 years ago. It's very clear in my mind, that whole moment. But I saw the screening, and the Hughes brothers were in attendance. And so I just got to listen to them talk, for 30, 40 minutes about making this film. And one of the first things, of course, you watch this movie, and it's funny because this scene probably happens like 8 minutes in, and it just holds the entire movie. And you come out of the movie and you're like, hey, I got to ask about that bridge scene. And he was the main thing I pulled out of that, other than it was laborious and took a lot of work. Denzel had to drop some weight from some other roles he was coming out of. And it took a lot. It took a lot for him to get in, into shape to do this. All these sequences are tough. But the thing that I took away is they pointed out how he operates best when he's waiting for people to come to him. And we can see him just dice everyone effortlessly. And the one time he gets his ass handed to him in that fight is when he tries to go to the chainsaw guy. He's now on the attack, and suddenly it's like he got punished for it. And so once he regrouped and let the attack come to him, then he diced him apart again. Like, it was indicative of the mentality that this guy needs to be having. He's not there to be a force for attacking people. He's there to be a force of peace, ideally. And if not, then he handles accordingly.
Defense.
Yeah. And so it's rooted. And then, of course, it also plays into the idea of his eyesight being an issue, which I'll tell you what they had to say about that. That's another thing that I recall. But I'm curious, how does that affect your viewing of the movie, if at all?
Oh, it solidifies, like, honestly, how I felt, because you were talking earlier about him, being about faith being, it could be good, used for good or bad, good or evil. And it's easy to say, oh, well, Eli was going around killing people, what was for his cause, just like these other bad guys. But the difference is that one little thing of he's doing it out of defense, and he's not doing it immediately. He gives the option for people to back away.
I may have cut out.
What?
I was asking specifically about the eyesight thing. Feel free to continue that thought. I just want to make sure. I was asking, how does the reveal at the end about the braille and the eyesight affect your viewing of the film?
Oh, totally didn't get that.
Sorry. Yeah.
Missed that. Sorry.
Yeah. All good. I think we cut out just for a hair second.
Okay.
But feel free to finish your last thought. Sorry. I think we also have a crazy lag happening right now too.
Okay. I think, sorry, that totally messed up my train of thought.
Sorry, man.
I think what I was trying to get at was him trying to, I'm sorry.
Damn it.
I totally
my bad,
lost my
man.
train of thought there.
My fault.
But okay, if we want to talk about the ending and the eyesight thing, faith is blind, that could be an homage to that. And the book is in safer hands than you actually think. Right. So this whole time we're thinking towards the end, I can't believe he gave up the book. That can't really be the book. Maybe this is just the cover. And in fact, I forgot about the Braille aspect of it. And so I didn't realize, I thought maybe that's just the cover and the book is actually still with him. And then we come to find out, no, the book is actually in safer hands than you think, right? He and a select few of other people are privy to this, right? And so it's just a wonderful reveal at the end, and then it gives everybody their just desserts. I feel like it gives Claudia her just dessert too. She's able to to say, go screw yourself to Carnegie. I'm not going to read that to you. And then Carnegie, it's his because he has what he's been fighting for the whole time, and it's still out of reach for him. And then what Eli has been preparing for 30 years, basically memorizing the entire book, he gets to actually recite everything that he has, worked for all the 30 years. I think it's just so beautiful and brilliant. It's just one of the best endings to a film. The best like reveals to a film that I have experienced in a very long time.
So whenever you find that out, it doesn't really affect the way you experience the rest of the film leading up to that, for good or bad. Like some people are put off by it, like, oh, I don't buy him as a blind guy or whatever, may be going on there. You feel like, oh, that works perfectly, and no issues. I'm good. I'm here.
Are you saying that he was blind?
I'm asking you what your interpretation of all of that is. What do you think? Do you not think he's blind? Or do you think he just happens to read Braille?
Yeah, I think he just happens to read Braille. I never once got the sense that he was blind. Is he blind?
I mean, that is the question. What about there's a whole shot.
That's where we're having the disconnect, because there's no ounce of me that thought he was blind in this whole thing.
Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. That's the implication, some may say, because there's that whole close-up shot as he's reciting it after the reveal of the Braille. We do that really close push in on his eyes to see that like there's some color loss in his cataracts or whatever.
Oh.
Nothing, huh? That's a new thought.
That is a 100% new thought. I mean, it might be that he's going blind, but I feel like after 30 years, and maybe even before.
So this,
I don't know.
This plays
I never thought about it for like once, because he breaks into that house where at the beginning where he stays for the night, and he's looking around. I see him like tilting his head and stuff and looking into rooms. He might be like going blind, but I never thought of him as actually blind.
Interesting. Give me 1 second. My light's flickering. Yeah. Okay. Like my first time viewing it, that jumped out at me because the whole Braille reveal, but along the way, I mean, we have all these moments of him smelling things, right? Like under the bridge, the first thing he says is the nice thing about nobody showering anymore is I can smell the hijacker a mile away. And of course the guy says that the leader of that gang is like, oh, I guess what's that? It's impressive. That's the thing he says, right? It's impressive. You could smell us. Like, what's that say about our hygiene boys or something like that? And along the way, there's all these other little moments of his scent and his hearing. And yeah, the whole reveal of the book is in Braille coupled with the close up of the eye led me strongly to think, wait, he's blind. And that's also why Carnegie is freaking out. He's like, no way he is. No way he is. The implication again being no way he's blind. It's just never, spoken aloud, of course. Yeah. So, okay. I guess it makes our conversation a little less interesting because you don't have a strong opinion. But that was a question posed to the Hughes brothers of like, is he blind? How is he able to do all that according to y'all? How strict were y'all in filming that? And they were like, yeah, we weren't very strict. We didn't want it to be this hyper analyzed aspect of the film where, you go back through it and say, oh, how closely is he acting blind throughout the film? They're like, that was never really very important to us because we all have different opinions. I think the writer has a different opinion and each of the brothers have different opinions. And one was like, yeah, I think he's like actually blind and he's doing a bit. And every time he's looking around, he's listening to sounds. And it's less about making out shapes than it is about like picking up subtleties of the room he's in or what have you. Just like whenever he's in the gunfight in the street, he shoots back. He never starts shooting. It's always, oh, this guy, a bullet came from over here. I'm going to turn and react to that. A bullet came from over here. I'm going to turn and react to that. He didn't aim at Carnegie. He hit him from shooting someone else. And so and then the other brother was like, yeah, I think he just had like really bad eyesight. He was like cataracts that he's been living with for a while. And therefore he can make out some stuff, but it's not very good. It's just not very good eyesight. And so everyone kind of had their own opinion about it.
Even the people that made it.
Yeah. Yeah.
They have different. That's cool. Okay.
Yeah. But it seems important to some degree from a writing perspective, at least, about why would this guy have this book in the first place, and let alone be able to read it before the apocalypse. I don't think there's a lot of how to read Braille books standing around, just laying around after nuclear annihilation. And so maybe for Gary Whitta, it meant one thing, and they just shot it to their own taste and specificity, which is fine. For me, as a huge fan of this, it doesn't bother me at all. Like I go with it. I watch it a little bit here and there, but it never really pulls me out. I'm so with the characters in the story that I'm fine. Like I take it as, I like the cataract perspective personally. I'm like, he can make out some stuff, but mostly he's reacting in fight sequences to sounds and movement. And that helps him. Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I kind of would rather fill in a backstory where maybe he had a daughter who was blind, who's now deceased, and so that's how he knows. Like whatever. I'd rather this guy knows Braille, but he can see. That feels more believable, quote unquote, than a blind guy who can shoot somebody off of a rooftop just because they shot at him in a gunfight. Like I just, it's hard for me to buy that. And all just the way that it was shot, because I never thought it, not one time, even after knowing that the book was in Braille, did I ever think that he was actually blind. Ever.
That's funny.
So I guess the whole time I had been building this a backstory for him up in my head. And so I didn't want to let it go. But
that's amazing.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it really is.
What's amazing is that the Hughes brothers had differing opinions on him. That to me is amazing. That is like so cool because I feel like it breaks so many rules that we talk about. Like you've got to, know these characters inside and out. You've got to, like have the story in your mind and stuff. Like, no, you have two directors who looked at this guy completely different ways of how he goes about his life and how he goes about achieving his goal. And yet it worked. Like, how cool is that? And for them to be, obviously they're brothers, but for them to be okay with that, like, I think this, well, I think that, and to still make something so great and so impactful is just a wonderful thing. Like, that's so cool.
I love it. Last few notes here. The visual styling of the film, my God. I mean, I think first, and there's a reason I didn't label this section like cinematography or directing, because it's a team. There's a whole team effort happening here. And just from a very big macro standpoint, one of the things I really love about this film is it has its own look and style. This is one of those kind of the Matrix films where you could pull a frame from anywhere in this film and instantly know that's Book of Eli. And not enough films do that. And so I really adore the strong visual approach that, the Hughes brothers have. And a lot of their films have this approach. And in specifics, like the set decoration, the set design, the production design, amazing. Like the town itself, the whatever you want to call that crazy, town. Oh my God, there's so many details that you just drown. Like you can't pull it all in. And in its detail, it just washes over you, and you instantly understand, yeah, this is a wrecked town trying to rebuild. And it just feels right. It feels like the apocalypse. And I mean, I think that even starts from the opening oneer, which is just tops. We open, in the forest with, nuclear snow kind of falling down. And it paints the world effortlessly. I mean, with a lot of effort. It feels effortless as a viewer. And it's so good. It's establishing the world, our hero, and just in a very, 30 to 60 seconds, painting exactly what we're going to be walking into. And then I love too that, he's killing a cat for food. What a strong opening choice. Not a deer, right? A cat. And it just reveals the total desperation of this world. And then the end of that oneer is this, it takes 4 or 5 seconds to register what you're even looking at as you realize, oh, that's a guy, because he's so perfectly still. And you're like, what is he doing? And then you slowly register, oh, he's holding an arrow. Wait, what is happening? And it just slowly kind of forms in your head that, he's about to take this cat out. And I think my one regret is we don't see how he skins it. And I've heard there's so many ways to do that. No, I'm kidding. I'm sorry.
God, there we go. Nice. Nicely done.
But the opening, I mean, the first, hour and a half, really strong color choices, right? The outdoors are very black and white, right? Almost it's desaturated, but it's hard to tell. And this is a tricky decision that you have to make. How much of that desaturation is on set versus in post? Like how much are they doing this later in the film, like in the color grade and going in power windows, like, okay, let's desaturate this. Instead, a lot of that you can do through your actual wardrobe selection. Like, oh, let's desaturate everything. That way, it's a little easier to keep your skin tones nice and sharp and bright, the right color that you want there. Or not, or maybe you just, take it down to 25% saturation in post, maybe a combination of the two. I think it is important to figure that out ahead of time though, because if you start that process with the understanding that we're going to paint and choose our wardrobe coloring based on more muted, desaturated tones, you will screw yourself over in post whenever you take the saturation even further. Then suddenly you're almost getting black and white whenever you're not actually supposed to be getting, and you're just creating more work for yourself in the color process. And so figuring that out ahead of time,
it's almost like I totally agree. It's almost like more important to work with your team, your set team, your wardrobe team when you're doing something like this. You can't have a lot of blacks if you're going to desaturate everything. Then you have nothing, no texture to go off of, right? You have to have something that will look dark, but has hues to it, depending, you have to do a lot of testing as opposed to like, okay, well, we want to focus on red in this scene because of that. Okay, well, we find the right hue of red and that's fine. It's much more in depth. I think that's a great thing to call out there.
That's why they call them the Hughes brothers, by the way.
I'm sorry. Oh God.
Okay.
All right. They come in threes. I'm expecting one more.
I'm saving a whammy. No.
Okay.
But the indoor stuff is a lot of warmer tones. It's rusty. It feels patina, like everything's been oxidized. And it just feels like the world is perfectly represented through the color choices. And so in every phase of visualizing this world, it's just perfectly established. The set deck is in harmony with the color grade, is in harmony with, the sky replacement. And my God, they did so much sky replacement in this thing. And it works. Like, it just works. I think it's all beautiful until we get to the West Coast, and apparently the apocalypse has to end in San Francisco, because we get there, right? Suddenly the sky, we get our blue back. And we get the sense of hope, the rewarding of our faith, or however you want to interpret that. Maybe life is growing again out here. And I love that it just coincides with, this is where all the knowledge is being stored, to your point about them collecting knowledge for humanity and reviving, intellectual capacity and what have you. And which I think goes hand in hand with the building of society. The more learned you are, the less violence you're probably prone to. I think that all kind of plays together nicely. The only other things, let's see what else I got. Bridge scene. Yeah, we did that. At the establishing, right? We do that whole opening wonder, and then we go into the cabin. I love the way we kind of continue to establish the world and our hero. They have this really nice music montage of our character's night routine. Eli, right? And it just, great song choice. And it just builds his solitude and loneliness. And we just kind of need to spend time with Eli in order to make sure we're connecting with him. We just saw him kill a cat. And so we don't want to jump to him killing a bunch of people too. We need to establish that we actually do like this guy. And so he feeds a little mouse, right? It's all these little touches to say, okay, he's not like garbage. He's got a heart. He's just surviving though. And that we can forgive. And so, yeah, just spending time with him connects us to him. And the music, of course, builds emotional depth that we project onto him. It's just really, really well done. And in a similar way, later in the film, whenever they're exiting the town, and Solara is tagging along and he has to rescue her, there's that moment after her rescue, and he just butchers those guys. I mean, every time he fights, his goal is to get through it quickly. And again, I just respect this movie so much for getting through the fight sequences with a nice flourish, but also efficiently, because that's Eli. He's efficient. It's not about dragging it out and looking cool. It's about winning, and that's it. But he butchers those guys, and I love that when we cut, whatever moments later, he's carrying those arrows, and you can paint the mental image of him pulling those arrows out. And then they're walking, and we kind of had this long two shot that she walks into, and she starts crying. She breaks down. So good. This world is not a world that she's used to. And I love that just because the bad things are constantly happening doesn't mean the human element is erased from humanity. We need to see that she's not over it yet. She's going to need a minute over narrowly escaping rape and murder. Like, let's make sure emotionally that's still washing over her. And it's just a beautiful little extra moment. And they fill this moment. This movie could have been chopped down 20 minutes, but you need those 20 minutes to build your characters, build some humanity into everyone. And my last thought is, you could look at this movie and outline it. It's not a lot. It's not a lot happening, right? We're going to establish the world. We're going to establish our character. We're going to see him kick some ass under the bridge. And now we're kind of building up his personal, not just threat, but what he is and isn't trying to do. And we start to get a sense of his goals, and we're mentally slowly building up like who he is. Enters a town, and you could keep kind of checklisting. And once you get done with this outline, it's not a lot. There's probably like 9 or 10 things on this checklist of the outline. And so many of those things happen in one location, the town, that it's deceptively simple. And my point there is, if you're out there writing a story, building an outline, you may not need as much as you think you do. It's deceptively easy once you understand what your goal is, what's your theme. You can really hack away a lot of what doesn't need to be there and just focus on what is my story about. Anything that isn't helping that case, I don't need it. It doesn't matter if it's a cool scene. I'm sure they had a lot of cool fights, that they could have went to, and they said no. The only fights in this movie are the ones that he has to have, In fact, we see him avoid one, and we see kind of the toll that it takes on him not helping those two people. Because later in the film, he runs into those, right? And he runs into those guys again, and he's much quicker to react than any other time, because he's like, I know what this guy's about already. I've already judged you. Boom. And I love he lets him go, and he just collapses at the bar. Yeah. Anyway, that's the quick and dirty version of my Book of Eli. I love it, man. I think this is such an underrated film. It's just a wonderful experience in my
Totally
summation.
agree. And I don't think that anybody else could have played it as good as Denzel. I just feel like such a great casting for that.
It's so one of the other things I remember from the Q&A afterwards is how they got Gary Oldman. Is they had Denzel, they were working with him, and as they were working through certain scenes, Denzel would be like in rehearsal, like, you know how Gary would say this? Gary would, bam, like, I love this guy. I'm telling you, man, Gary, like it would be interesting. And he just kept Denzel kept envisioning Gary Oldman here. And after a while they were like, wait, you know what? Let's get Gary. Let's get Gary Oldman. And they checked, and the stars aligned, and he was able to do it. And they were like, and the amazing thing is, everything we thought he would do, he did the opposite. Like, he just showed up and he did something completely different. And it was wonderful. Like, obviously it's Gary freaking Oldman. Yeah. And so
the last thing I'll say is the sound in this film is amazing. Just point that out. Well, the music is incredible and perfect in every way. In fact, I don't have any idea who did the music, but it's freaking flawless because I experience it. I don't necessarily hear it unless I want to. And then when I do, it's enjoyable. But the sound is so good. Gary's voice in that clip you played is unbelievably powerful and deep and heavy and weighted and evil at the same time, that he's trying to be convincing that he's good. But that's captured in a way that's just, whoever the sound guy was on this film, or guys or girls, just killed it, captured those moments flawlessly. And then all the Foley at the end of the steps and the crunches, it's mixed absolutely just wonderfully, to where I hear all the textures. I hear the way Denzel talks is very pointed. His P's and his T's are like, he speaks with precision, and it's important to capture that in a way and not kill it in post when you're mixing. That really brings his character to life. And I think that they did just an amazing job at that. It was super strong.
Nice. The score. This is probably my fourth or fifth favorite score of all time. And I realized we talked about on the Fountain about how great that score was. And it's right up there with Interstellar. And I finally remembered my second or third, depending on the day, probably second, which is Sunshine. That's my other score that is just
Danny
sublime.
Elfman?
Yeah. No.
Who did that?
God. I'm forgetting it's a band, and I'm suddenly forgetting, and it's funny because it's relevant to
Sun Ra?
No. God dang it. But the score in this film stays in my head rent free. Like I hear it all the time. Like I would be surprised if there's more than a few days that go by and this score doesn't float through my mind.
Wow.
Probably more than any other score ever. It's so simple and it's so beautiful, and it speaks so powerfully to the theme, I think, on this very, musical tone. It's just, God, it's good. And they're patient with it. They don't just, over the top and hit you every chance they get. They wait. They're very patient on when they unleash it. And this does feel like an unleashing. I adore it. I don't know. Did anything pop out to you about the music or the score?
It's perfect. It feels lonely yet vital at the same time. It feels pointed, like there's a reason for it to be there. Like you said, they don't just use it all the time. It feels like if I heard it outside of the film, I would know it. so memorable at the same time, but it doesn't distract from the story. It motivates the story, which is the sign of a great score. It just and it bolsters all of the other, like the actual music that Denzel listens to, like the choices that of what he's listening to and what the score is doing is just they are very symbiotic. Yeah, and when it's not there, it's also important too. It's just so good. Like the choices they made just are super strong.
So dang good. Nice.
Yeah.
What are you going to recommend this week?
Oh, that is a good question that I am not prepared for. What are you going to recommend this week?
I'm going to recommend a Netflix show by A24. It's called Beef, and it's so good. It's Steven Yeun and Ali Wong, and it's everything you would want from an A24 series. Like, it's a limited series. It's really strong storytelling, really strong characters, surprises galore. Yeah, it'll have you feeling some kind of way. Let me put it that way. So Beef, I know they probably could have found a better title for it, but it's what's for Netflix. Yeah, Beef is what's up. Anything come to mind? Is there
Yeah, I've been digging into this Waco American Apocalypse on Netflix, and that was what I had in my head, but I didn't think about it, which is, kind of goes along with this theme, but it's just really interesting because I remember this happening and I remember what I was told. And going in and watching something like this where you have Branch Davidians they actually interview, it just makes it really interesting to see a different perspective. Not saying that it wasn't, I'm not saying anything about either side. I'm just saying it's very interesting to see another aspect of this, because look, I don't care what you do with your life and what you believe, you do it. As long as you're not hurting other people or forcing people to do stuff, I'm good with it. But it's just an interesting perspective that I'd never thought about too. So yeah, Waco American Apocalypse. It's a Netflix doc, and it's really well done.
Nice. Great recommendation. Stay tuned for next week. We're going to take a look at Danny Boyle's Slumdog Millionaire. That'll be fun. I'm excited about that. And if you're enjoying the show, don't forget, drop us a review. Don't forget to subscribe. Leave us a note if there's something you want us to talk about or the kind of things you find interesting. And if you want to leave a note on this episode, you can do that at thepestlepodcast.com/the Book of Eli.
And our quote of the day today is from St. Augustine. This is an incredible quote. There is no saint without a past, no sinner without a future. What? I mean, how heady and yet how poignant and true,
My favorite aspect of faith and specifically Christianity is always that there is grace, there is forgiveness. And I think this is one of the things that's too often disappointing me about Christians themselves, is that they don't really live this ethos. It feels like a lot of Christians, and again, I'm coming from the background of someone going into ministry. Like I'm not speaking out of turn here. This is my experience, I should say. There's so many people that are more interested in judging you only by your past or what they think your future is going to be. It seems like there's a real lack of grace from so many. And I'm so grateful that I know so many Christians who are not that way, because there are some really wonderful people of faith, both Christians, even Mormons, which is one of my least respected religions, if I'm being frank. But, how are you living your faith? And I love this story so much because, again, it's more about the faith. And just conceptually, I like it because it feels like a journey, almost the inverse of Lord of the Rings, where Frodo is trying to take the ring to Mordor. It feels like Eli is trying to pull the ring back from Mordor and bring it back to the world. Like there's something that, I can do to bring humanity, hope. And that's worth something. I'm not a religious guy anymore, but man, I respect people who know how to have faith and grace, regardless of if you're in conflict or not. I adore this movie because so many reasons, but just it says a lot of good things about faith, and the realization of Eli at the end to be like, I've realized something about myself. He judged himself. He didn't need someone else. He didn't need Solara to come and judge him. He did that for himself. And I hope that for all of us, that we can evaluate ourselves and say, am I really living out my truths? And if not, that's okay. There's a future for me still. How can I correct myself?
Wow. Well said. I have nothing to add to that, honestly, because you said everything I was thinking. That's amazing. The one thing I will say that I did not like, there was one thing I did not like about this movie, and then I bet it's the same
thing. God, say it.
Okay, here we go. It's just something I have to do. Her line at the end, when she's talking to the guy on the island, anytime anybody says it's just something I have to do, I'm taken out. Like, really? It's been a perfect movie up until that point, and you have to have Mila Kunis say it's just something I have to do? Like, what a cop-out. Like, that made me so mad at the end. Like, just have her say nothing. And then she's gone. She leaves. You don't have to insert anything there.
No,
Sorry.
It's funny.
Is that your moment or no?
Kinda. It is the end moment with her. I don't care about the line so much as I don't buy her as the new Eli. She hasn't earned that yet. She hasn't earned the right to be a warrior, out there handling business. And so I think there's probably another approach to have her going back, whatever, to save her mom, or because she does need to go back and take care of her mom.
Yeah.
And that's great. But positioning her as this new Eli is really out of bounds. I'm like, I don't.
Where she puts his sword or knife or whatever in the back.
Yeah.
Like, no.
She hasn't earned that. She hasn't earned that. Like that level of skill and fight, she is not prepared for. She is going to die within a mile. She needs like a car and some guns, and then it's like, okay, now let's talk shop. But that bothers me as a final moment of like, oh, y'all didn't earn that. You did not earn that 1 ounce. Yeah.
For all of you writers out there, never write "it's just something I have to do."
I have a list.
There are a few lines. There's a list, right? We've talked about this. There's a list of lines that just should never be used ever again.
Jokes. Yeah, there's this great list from Workaholics. I'll add it to the show notes.
Yes.
Of jokes that should never ever be used. That's great. I have another list of things that I look for in crappy films. One of them, I'll just give you my top bugaboo, is I still can't believe. That's the worst. Flare bottle rocket of exposition is coming at you right now. I still can't believe you're getting married tomorrow. I still can't believe it's been 20 years since I last saw you. Whatever follows, I still can't believe. You're a shitty writer. Rethink your dialogue.
That's a great point. I love it. Oh, man.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'll look out for that on any film that I've ever seen now.
That's right.
I can't unsee that.
You cannot.
Oh, this has been fun. Thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode and our deep dive into the Book of Eli. Make sure to join us next week, Slumdog Millionaire. It's going to be a lot of fun. And please subscribe, review us wherever you get your podcast, and share us with your friends because it all helps. And if there's a film that you'd like to see us kind of dissect, please let us know. Sometimes we do those as well at request. Not always, but we do when we can. And until next week, I'm Todd.
I'm Wes.
Go watch some movies. Nice. Cutting.
Well done, man. That was nice.